Well, hello from Twickenham. Well, what about that? A record-breaking win for Ireland over England at Twickenham. 42 points to 21. Rory O'Connor and Cian Tracey are here. Now, if only someone saw that coming. This is your time, Cian.
I'm staying humble, that's all I'm saying. But I did call it in Paris.
Staying humble on camera.
You didn't believe me,
you
but
kept reminding us.
I kept the faith, and I backed them in the paper today in our predictions. But didn't quite see the margin of victory, obviously, coming.
Sensational.
But yeah, glad to have called
Fair
it
play,
right.
Cian.
Yeah.
Well, now, firstly, a reminder that our rugby coverage on Indo Sport is sponsored by Energia, who sponsored the game at all levels in Ireland. To learn more about the rugby partnerships and exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, go to energia.ie/rugby. Rory, where did it all go right?
Oh, it's a good question, Sinead. I think that's one of the great Irish Six Nations wins. It's amazing that this fixture, so often the team's fortunes can pivot on it, and even the Andy Farrell era pivoted on a home win over England in 2021, and that came kind of out of the blue. They told us it was coming, but it was hard to see it. Where did it go right? Well, Andy Farrell backed his experienced players, and those experienced players delivered in spades. Defensively, they scrambled their way through a very difficult opening 10-15 minutes, survived a couple of English onslaughts when England were winning collisions. The scrum was on top, and it looked like it could be one of those days. And then they were so accurate and so clinical when they went up the other end of the pitch, and they just made England doubt themselves. They took advantage of a very poor English performance. I don't think I've ever seen George Ford be as poor as he was today, but that's not on Ireland. They believed in themselves. They believed in their game plan. They repaid the coach's faith in them, and a number of players had their best ever games for Ireland, which you kind of have to do to deliver it on a day like this. And it all came together beautifully into some brilliant tries. I think the enduring memory of today will be Irish players galloping through the middle of Twickenham, breaking tackle. Stuart McCluskey just brushing Ollie Lawrence aside and marching through in the build-up to the Tommy O'Brien try. Or was it the Balakoon try? It was the Balakoon try.
There's so many
Doris,
tries you can't keep up.
Like Joe McCarthy did at one stage, even though he was pulled back for it. It was just like, green jerseys galloping,
Doris,
getting the freedom of Twickenham. Like, I've never seen that before. So it was one of those beautiful reminders that sport can, it can certainly punch you in the face when you're doing predictions. I got this completely wrong, and I'm delighted to say that I've got it wrong, because that's the Ireland that you want to see. That's the Andy Farrell Ireland that we haven't seen for too long. And if that's the template now, if that's their reference point, I think the players will really, really benefit from that experience of like 15,000 Ireland fans singing after the game in Twickenham, getting a lap of honour, having a good day out. Yeah. In an Ireland jersey again.
The Olays
it's so
going
important.
around, everything. It was just the atmosphere from the Irish fans' point of view was incredible.
Yeah, I would echo pretty much all of that. Like, I was writing in my match report that, like, so often Twickenham is a graveyard for Ireland teams, but I think in time we'll look back at this as the rebirth of Andy Farrell's side, because they've been kind of crying out for a statement win over the last little while, and obviously going through a bit of a transition. But it was the big players who Andy Farrell stuck by, delivered performances. But what about the guys like Robert Balakoon, Tommy O'Brien, the bench again, unheralded guys, I think it's fair to say. And the Irish team suddenly has a fresher kind of feeling to it. I think, like I said, guys like Robert Balakoon has just been an absolute revelation. Look, we've said loads of times already that this guy would have won loads more Ireland caps if he had stayed fit, but it's not just what he does in attack, but his defence is outstanding. He's such a clever defender. He reads the game absolutely brilliantly. I mean, did he have 2 try-saving tackles? Speaking of which,
he won 4 dominant tackles, and he won a jackal turnover and was responsible for 3 turnovers in the stats.
And again, he did some unbelievable things with the ball. Scored his try, obviously, pretty handy finish, but the way he broke through for Tommy O'Brien's try was exceptional. And Andy Farrell has just highlighted it there in the press conference in terms of a moment to sum up Ireland's fight was Stuart McCluskey hunting down Marcus Smith. I mean, at that stage of the game, and obviously Stuart McCluskey had got through an absolute truckload of work up to that point. Marcus Smith was fresh off the bench. I've no idea how Stuart McCluskey caught him. It was like Marcus Smith was running in quicksand. But that
it was
moment,
like as if the game depended on it.
Yeah,
the way he
the victory
ran
was
after,
already secured, but
in the bag,
it summed up Ireland's doggedness, their determination, because their performance was so excellent that it's easy to forget that the way England started the game, and I said it to both of you guys, like England were getting over the gain line with nearly all their carries at the start. You were kind of thinking, okay, we've seen this movie before. So the way Ireland sort of withstood that early onslaught, went up at the other end of the pitch, Jack Crowley kicks a penalty, and then to back it up with the try completely against the run of play by Jamieson Gibson-Park, who I thought delivered one of the great performances in Irish jersey in a team full of 8 9s out of 10. He was just amazing. I
think the McCluskey moment, we wondered, I think, in the last while about Ireland's identity and how they lost a bit of that playing identity that they, like Farrell, have built such an Irish team that the fans could be proud of. They played this beautiful rugby, but they also worked incredibly hard for each other. And I'm not saying they stopped working hard, but I think they lost a bit of what they stood for. Didn't they say in November, we need to remember what we stand for? And during the Lions tour, I think it was the Brumbies game, Mac Hansen hunted back a couple of times, and Farrell was off his feet. And you could see in the coaching box, McCluskey, that kind of no talent moment where he hunted. Like in fairness, he's got more speed than I do. Like more speed than I appreciate.
It took a bit of talent.
It took a bit of natural talent,
mean,
but he like that's what Farrell wants from his players. That never say die. Never give up on your teammate. Imagine how that must have felt for the other 14 players, for the lads who just come on, that this guy who'd been in the trenches up against one of England's power players, coming off best and some of the collisions coming off worse than other ones, but he kept going. He had such big interventions, and with the game effectively in the bag, he's hunting them down. That's what this Ireland team stand for, or have stood for on their best days. That's what they didn't stand for in Paris. That's why Farrell was so annoyed about it in Paris. We saw some improvement in Italy. I think, I thought the rewatch, the Italy performance wasn't as bad as I when we reviewed it on the pod last Saturday. I thought it was a better performance, but it was nowhere near the levels they got to today. And that's the kind of thing when Andy Farrell goes into the meeting room on whenever they regather later in the week, because they have a few days off now, he'll put that incident up, that Stuart McCluskey hunting down, and he'll have a few different examples like that. And he said, that's what he said, you look at Jude Postlethwaite, or players who are new to the international scene, Bryn Ward, who might be in for his debut in against Wales, and he goes, that's what I expect from you. And he spoke about that in there, that the senior players have to show the younger players what it means to be international. And I think Rob Balakoon's getting it. I think McCluskey's 33, but he's a relatively inexperienced international player. Like, he's been in and out a long time. It's 10 years since he made his debut here. What a day for him. I agree that Gibson Park, I think, was on par with Conor Murray in Chicago today. That was like, I wasn't doing player ratings, but I'd be looking at 10 for him there. Yeah. I don't think he put a foot wrong, but I think McCluskey was right there up with him. And what a talisman for the team. Bundyaki comes back in for Wales. Robbie Henshaw's on the cusp of coming back in, but you could not take Stuart McCluskey out of this team.
And that's what I mean by it just has a fresh feel to it, that all of a sudden Stuart McCluskey is Ireland's talisman. You look at the back three of Jamie Osborne, Tommy O'Brien and Robert Balakoon. That has a very fresh feel to it. Now, I know obviously the one unfortunate part of today was James Lowe, what looks like a serious leg injury, but I can't imagine.
He sure as hell did enough cheering on the sideline anyway.
Yeah, and in fairness, he still got the kick away while he was on one leg. Yeah. And look, I'm sure it's not a huge switch, but I can't imagine that Tommy O'Brien has played too many games on the left wing, but he was brilliant. And what I loved about, just to go back to Balakoon again, was for Tommy O'Brien's try is where he found himself on the opposite wing, because I think that was a huge work on, to use a boring rugby cliche, for him when he came into the Ireland squad, was that I think he had a tendency just to stay out wide and kind of wait for the ball to come to him, and we know that Andy Farrell wants his wingers to be untidy. Well, that moment I thought typified it, and it felt like sort of Robert Balakoon's arrival into the international stage. I know he's had brilliant games, he was excellent last week, but I just loved that little link play, and he showed everything that he's about in terms of spotting the gap, going through it, but then having the wherewithal, the confidence to just put Tommy O'Brien away for a brilliantly worked try. And I thought the quality of Ireland's tries was excellent. You touched on them going up a notch in general. I thought their attack was so much slicker today.
The speed on the edge makes such a difference to them. I know Mac Hansen and James Lowe will remain part of this setup, and very much like when Mac Hansen comes back, he'll be pushing Robert Balakoon and Tommy O'Brien for that right wing spot. But the change up, the fullback is an option as well, but the change up that those two players give you on the edge, the confidence to be able to swing it wide. McCluskey, that left to right pass out to Balakoon in the build up to the first try, wasn't it? Like that's something that Ireland haven't. That's an outlet that Ireland haven't had for a long time, and that makes them such a more potent and dangerous team at a time when maybe they're not winning in the collisions, or the game has maybe moved away from them in terms of that multi-phase, although it didn't look like it had today. But the ability to swing it wide and know that your outside attacker can get outside their wingers, even though like Arundel and Freeman are fast players, it's an outlet that Ireland haven't had for a while, and having both pacey wingers, it's just a look that Ireland can now throw at teams at different points. Because when Hugo Keenan comes back, Mark Hansen comes back, James Lowe gets back from this injury, Calvin Nash comes back into the mix, suddenly that's an area of huge depth. And that's something that's built through this tournament.
I think the quality of their set piece strikes I thought was excellent, and I think Andrew Goodman deserves a lot of credit. I think he's a guy who a lot of supporters would have liked, to see a little bit more of his stamp in the team. Well, we saw it there today. You go back to, I think it was the first try, wasn't it, where they ran the move off the scrum that put Balakun away down the right. That was a pre-planned training ground move. So was the try that Dan Sheehan eventually scored when they ran the 5 metre tap. Really clever invention, and that's what we want to see more of. But I think it speaks to a team that's really confident when those moves come off. And again, I go back to, you're saying it looked like the old Ireland. That is them at their best when they have these intricate set piece moves that work brilliantly. And obviously we'll get on and talk about the man pulling the strings at 10, but I thought he had a massive obviously role in how well everything sort of functioned from an attack point of view.
I completely agree with that. I think the fact that they had front football and they won collisions, and their line out ran very well. The scrum was problematic, but their line out ran very well. Their collision winning, their breakdown work was really accurate, really on point. They blew England away physically at times when they had the ball, and that makes life so much easier for Gibson Park and Crowley, and then that allows them to thrive, and that gives them the opportunity to thrive. And too often Ireland have not been able to win that physical battle. Like McCarthy had his best game in the Six Nations today.
Yeah.
James Ryan was. I thought that was one of James Ryan's best games here.
And he was
Doris,
excellent last week as well.
The back
James
row,
Ryan.
which was always going to be such a huge contest.
Like they threw a lot of offloads today because they were winning collisions on their terms, and that's a huge part of what. And a good Irish performance relies on that breakdown, at that speed of ball. I think nearly half of their ball was between 0 and 3 seconds. That just makes such a difference to the back line, and it allows them to thrive. And then they did thrive because Crowley made the most of it.
Yeah, and it was such a system success across the board. We kind of mentioned that defence, but in the first half, they made 109 tackles to England's 59. It was incredible defensive stands.
Yeah, and they really scrambled well.
They did.
There was times where it looked like England were through, and someone
Tommy Freeman being taken down by Balakun.
Amazing moment. There were so many big moments. It was a game
full of
key moments. And you know what? And I said it to you guys on halftime that when England got over for the try, that they probably deserved on the balance of play, and Ireland were unlucky just not to be able to hold them out. But that did sort of change the complexion of, I would imagine, Steve Borthwick's halftime team talk. And I imagine England still probably got a rocket at halftime. But on the flip side, you can imagine what Andy Farrell was saying in the Ireland dressing room, that we have to get out early in the second half and score first. And I thought this has been something that I've been critical of this Ireland team over the last year or so, is that when they make a mistake, they compound it by backing it up with another. Well, I thought their cool heads really came to the fore. There was one or two kind of occasions throughout the game where they weren't quite rocking, but they just required a steady hand. And I thought nothing summed that up more than when Jamie Osborne went to the bin after England scored their second try, wasn't it? And you're kind of thinking, okay, Ireland just need to hang on for the next 10 minutes. But they worked their way down the other end of the pitch, and Jack Crowley kicks a penalty.
They handled that really well.
And that was just such a brilliant moment for a team that were under pressure, and it just spoke volumes for how calm they were in the moment, which isn't something I think we can say about the Ireland team over the last while. It was really refreshing to see.
That period after half time, England had brought on Steve Borthwick. I wouldn't say he panicked, but he was trying to make changes from the sideline to improve the team. He brought in Jamie George at hooker, and then he brought on Marcus Smith at fullback to try and get something. But that meant that England had George Ford and Marcus Smith in the backfield, and they're giving up a massive height advantage on the Irish players, and Ireland spotted it immediately. Jack Crowley puts up a really good kick. I think it was Balakun got up and won it. Ireland played through that, and they ended up getting, not only did they score, they get Henry Pollock sent to the sin bin, so England are down to 14, so all the momentum is gone, and then Cian goes over. That's really smart. I think they could have even been smarter. I think that there was moments where, when Stewart was on the pitch, they didn't kick in behind and exploit the fact that England didn't have a fullback. When they look at this, they will find room for improvement, and that's the exciting part, is that they've turned the corner, but there's still things that they can get better at. And that's, when you've got there's always room for growth, but when you have a record win at Twickenham and you can still look back on, say, the second half period where they compounded errors, they knock on by Jeremy Lockman, scrum penalty, line out penalty, suddenly did they concede off that? Certainly they had a spell of pressure in round 22. That's the bad stuff that's been happening recently. But the fact that they were able to weather that storm, the buffer on the scoreboard helped, but even they thought their way through it. They killed the sin-bin period. Not only did they score the penalty, but they also just went for a load of scrum resets and took their time and cleaned their studs and just managed the clock, which was just really, really clever. And that comes from a bit of maturity and all that experience, that when Farrell is criticised for sticking with the experienced players, the reward for sticking with them is that they've been through this scenario before, they know what they're doing, and when they're playing well, they're still fantastic players. And he would be entitled to do a lap of honour and give two fingers to the critics. He hasn't. His post-match was fairly measured, but he got it right. What?
Be harsh on you if he gave you the two fingers for that.
Well, maybe I'd fully deserve it, but I think they'd accept themselves that they dropped off in the last year, and that's what they are aspiring to. And it's pretty, if they can finish this tournament with 4 wins from 5 again for the second year in a row, finish second, triple crown in the bag. If they kick on from here, it's a pretty decent return, especially when the first night went so badly.
Yeah. We obviously mentioned Jemison Gibson Park in passing. I mean, all of Andy Farrell's selections, everything was absolutely vindicated. Gibson Park was on the bench last week, back on today. Josh van der Fleer brought in. But Gibson Park, I mean, from the off, it was almost like he was ahead of play, like his quick thinking that time for his first try. He was just ahead of it. Yeah,
and I thought he managed the referee very well. Well, sorry, both referees, because that was the chaos of it all. Andrea Piardi going down, getting injured, and Pierre Brousset having to replace him. But I think Gibson Park, it was for the Freddie Stewart yellow card. He just very carefully and calmly and coolly just reminded, it was still Piardi, wasn't it, that Stewart had cynically killed the ball. And just as a side point, I was so happy that the referee sin-bin Stewart, because in so many instances like that, when a try has been scored, referees tend to say there's enough punishment, but it doesn't excuse the cynical play. Now, Jamie Osborne got done for it as well, and equally I think that is the right call. But Gibson Park, it's just what a rugby player. It's a joy to watch him when he is on that form, and I thought his partnership with Jack Crowley was really excellent. Crowley fully vindicated his selection, I thought. Yeah,
and they just look so fit. Was there talk about that? Maybe that the Italians look fit, or maybe last week they were on their feet, on their toes today.
Well, I think the decision to drop Gibson Park and Ty Byrne from the team and Josh van der Fleer from the 23 entirely, Farrell framed it as a dropping. He said this isn't about rotation. But I wonder how much he had, I can get away with this against Italy. These lads look a bit flat after the season that they've had after the Lions. Let's give them a breather. Let's also give them a bit of a rocket, like James Lowe got. And they come back into the team and they are refreshed by it. And when they're playing well, then everyone around them starts playing well. And Farrell was, again, that's vindication for his man management. And we don't know if Josh van der Fleer was told, look, put your feet up this week. You're coming back next week. I don't get that impression, but we saw the Josh van der Fleer of a couple of years ago for that 50 minutes. And then now they have Nick Timoney to come on and keep it up. So Josh doesn't have to do it for 80 minutes anymore.
Yeah.
And Timoney, I think, should get the start now against Wales.
He would deserve it.
I think he would. I think he's been exceptional. And it's like Cian Prendergast come into the team at short notice. And I know your confidence might have been hit a little bit when Jack Conan pulled out off the bench, because I thought Conan was going to be a key figure. But Cian Prendergast came on and he was really impactful. And he can't have not been affected. That's a double negative. He must have been affected by the fact that Sam was left out of the 23, and he wasn't picked initially either. He made one unbelievably dominant carry in the build-up to I think Jamie Osborne's try, and he was right on it. And that's another player who's got a good, had a bad night like Tommy O'Brien. Not that he was bad in Paris, but that was a tough night out for him, and he lost his place as a result. So he's had a good moment in a green jersey. Tommy O'Brien had a terrible night in Paris. He was hauled ashore. He's had an unbelievable experience, having been kind of recalled after losing out last week. And he got lucky with James Lowe, but he's now shown exactly what he can do at this level. So to round it back to Gibson Park and kind of that fitness that they had and the speed that they were able to play, I think that comes from. It's hard to know what that comes from. It's hard to know what buttons, because it felt like he'd pushed every button and he hadn't got a response.
We thought he'd run out of rope.
Maybe it's just the clarifying fear of Twickenham, the clarifying fear of what when it goes wrong here, it can be horrible. they looked nervous in the warm up. They looked. I remember you pointed out that Paul O'Connell was
yeah.
just staring at the ground for ages. I saw the scrum get minced by the third choice at one stage. Like, it didn't look like a great warm up, but sometimes it all comes together.
Jeez, we
and
saw
that
this.
concussion-
It's been a long time since we've seen the coaching staff celebrate the way they did for those tries.
That told you everything you needed to
Didn't
know
it?
about how much of a statement victory this was, and at the point
and probably how much under pressure they were as well.
100%. Yeah, it was amazing. And I think, just where did the performance come from and how did they build? Like, they've had more time together, which I think is a very
They got
important.
worse last year as the Six Nations went on. So
But they're
that's a
actually,
real.
yeah. So they're actually getting better now.
Yeah.
So like you look at the performance last week, and I agree with you. It was much better on second and third watch than maybe it might have felt live, because that Italy team is very good, and I don't think people were paying lip service by just saying that. I think they were very good, and then again this week they were much better. And I think the break weekend actually comes at a great time now for Ireland. I'm sure they'd like to get out again next week and keep the momentum going, but they'll have the few days off, like you said. They'll recuperate. They're going to play Wales on a Friday night at the Aviva, and then the Scotland game at the end. So I think they deserve a lot of credit, and the coaches deserve a lot of credit for how they've built into the tournament, because we're so used to kind of Ireland coming flying out of the traps. It's almost just a pity the Paris game was first up, because they were clearly so short, and just as they were in Chicago last year, and that is something they're going to have to address going forward.
But maybe you don't get today without Paris. Maybe they had to go through what it feels like to be off it, and to get that rocket when Andy Farrell calls them out for their intent and drops a few of them. Maybe like this team has been struggling for momentum really since 2024. I saw someone make the point that it was their best performance since Durban. It probably was. It's been a bit of a slog playing for Ireland for the last while. They got up for the Lions, those who were there. Maybe they had to just endure a couple of bad days to remind themselves of what they stand for, and maybe it doesn't. Farrell. Six Nations are hard to come by, and you have to. They're pretty special years when you do manage to pull together a title-winning performance. This is probably not going to be a title-winning year, although they've got themselves back on track potentially. Yeah. Hard to see France slipping up at this remove, but strange things are happening.
Now's your chance to make a bold prediction.
No,
we have track record.
We'll leave that to you.
But 2 years ago they won at Six Nations with a win over Scotland, and it was a bit underwhelming. I think people will be pretty happy if they win a triple crown. Having won their 4 games in a row, and I think that will be quite well received. So it'll be there's a new feeling to the team that a lot of it's enforced. I think a lot of the players wouldn't have got opportunities without injuries, but there's this feels like the day where they've bounced back, and now their challenge is to build on that.
You mentioned Jack Crowley earlier. Obviously it's been such a negative few weeks, and after last weekend and all the rest, so how do you think he went today?
I thought he was excellent.
Yeah.
When we were chatting in our video yesterday at the captain's run, I think you asked us what did we want to see from Jack Crowley, and certainly from my point of view it was to fit into the system and do what is asked of him. Don't try and be a hero, because I think Jack Crowley's game-breaking moments will always be within him. It's just about playing to the game plan that Andy Farrell has set out, and I thought he did that absolutely brilliantly. He kicked really well, missed a long-range penalty, which was probably just right on his sort of the edge of his radar. But like I mentioned, that kick with Jamie Osborne in the bin was just like nerveless. I know it was in front, but it was still about 40 metres out. Like an excellent kick. I thought like the shape of Ireland's attack, which obviously I've just praised there in terms of like Andrew Goodman's influence. I think Jack Crowley has to take a lot of credit for that, because if you think back to what he did off the bench against Italy, so much of the good stuff he did was bringing the shape that Ireland were lacking in attack. So this was a huge day, I think, for Jack Crowley. It doesn't suddenly mean, I think, that he's going to be Ireland's 10 forever, because it wasn't perfect, but I think it was an excellent display, and like he's surely going to keep the jersey for the rest of the Six Nations anyway. And now I think his destiny is back in his own hands, and we've seen Jack Crowley deliver these excellent performances in the past without maybe being able to back it up over a consistent period of time. Well, if this was a statement victory for Ireland, I feel like this could be a statement performance from Jack Crowley, but he has to back it up now in that Wales game and Scotland game.
The confidence he's going to get from that.
Yeah, and the confidence he gives the team as well around them. You could see that they believe in what he's doing, that he's taken ownership of it, and whatever hang-ups the coaches have had over the way he runs the week or the way he kind of commands the team through phase play, that didn't look like an issue today at all. And there's minor things he'll need to iron out, but by and large he got nearly everything right. I think he backed up good moments with good moments. He was made to make a lot of tackles.
Some of his tackles were savage.
Yeah, and they target him and he slid, I think he's down as 5 missed, but I think even the misses, he slowed the ball carrier down. Your out half is never going to make all of his tackles. So I don't see that as negative today at all. I think he took his chance, he took his opportunity. I wrote on Thursday that it's up to one of them to go and put this whole debate to bed. It doesn't have to be a debate. It doesn't have to be this obsession that we're talking about all the time. But because of none of them have taken it, and some it will be argued that he did take it in 2024, and Andy Farrell took it away from him. But Farrell even said on Thursday that look, neither of the lads come into this camp in good form. He didn't say it as explicitly as that, but he neither of them have been having a brilliant season. If Crowley can now take the good from today, keep the clutter out of his mind, go and just take all the confidence that this week gives him, and go and lead next. The open session against the 20s next week, be good in meetings, all that stuff that they require of him, then go into next week, and I presume he's starting against Wales. I presume he'll start against Scotland on the final day. I presume he's probably going to be starting against, is Australia up first in the summer? As long as he goes well with Munster. It's his jersey now. Not forever, but as long as he keeps playing well, there's no reason why it shouldn't be.
He needs to be himself, and I think that's what he was today. I think there's times where, particularly for Munster, he takes so much responsibility on himself in terms of trying to make things happen when the team is struggling, and in a way that's an admirable trait. But again, he fitted into the system, and I think he was himself. That is what I think the coaches really encourage him to be, is to be Jack Crowley. You don't need to be someone that you're not. And I think, the confidence that he's playing with, I think, was reflected in those around him. And that's exactly what we saw when he came off the bench last week as well.
Not sure if you can hear that banging, but I think it must be people. We're just outside the media centre here in case they're running up and down the stairs. But I feel like just doing a big exhale. It's like kind of holding in over the last.
It was a clap, then 3 breaths. That was well, they look calm out there.
Just even see the players they were just in good form. We're down in the mix zone there again. It's just
we should talk about England.
In a sec. Let's go more Ireland. Let's keep the vibes positive. Can we talk about Caelan Doris?
Yes.
I think Caelan.
Often another one of those runs. My goodness.
We will come to England. We'll give them their dues as well. I think Caelan Doris has been very honest over the last while that he hasn't been at his best, and he's said it himself. Caelan Doris at his best is running over people, and I think at times for Leinster, his role has almost become such a defensive role. And he's amazing at the breakdown, and obviously we know he pushes it sometimes over the limit, and he did that again today. But it's really important for Ireland, and by extension for Leinster, that Caelan Doris remains the ball carrier that he was when he broke onto the scene. Now, obviously, he had that serious shoulder injury last season. I would imagine it's probably taken him a while to, fully shake that off, because it was a really bad injury. But I thought he was immense today, and I thought it wasn't just the nature of his carries, but it was how it was a real captain's performance. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but you talk about the confidence that Jack Crowley gave to his players. I just thought the players fed off Caelan Doris, and I think he set the tone yesterday here in the captain's run when he spoke about that we want to get after England, we want to hunt them, and that was a term that Andy Farrell used inside there when he was talking about Stuart McCloskey running back. But I just thought Caelan Doris was his stats are through the roof, aren't they?
20 tackles.
20 tackles. And his carry, it was the venom in the carry, and he's been lacking that in Ireland.
We haven't seen that for a while,
that. And when he made that big line break through, another gaping hole in England's midfield. I mean, it was just remarkable. But Dan Sheehan had one, Josh van der Fleer had one. Holes were just appearing, but it was just brilliant to see Caelan Doris back to his rampaging, barnstorming best. Like I said, he will always bring the niggle and the edge around the breakdown, but they need to be careful not to turn him into just a pure defensive player, because he's too good when he's on the ball.
But he's playing Ireland. He's back playing Ireland, Caelan Doris. He's not doing the stuff that he's required to do at Leinster, which is the breakdown niggle, the barging,
making it a shit fight.
Making it a shit fight that they talk about all the time. He made 11 carries for 48 metres, and that must have felt good. Imagine those breaks and what they feel like as a player, and how good that makes you feel about
especially in Twickenham,
especially here, absolutely. So, it's. And the move to 7 is probably, with Ireland, has probably changed his role to some degree. His 8 is his best position, but I do like the fact that they can get him and Conan onto the pitch, and I think it's worth trying at certain games.
Horses for courses, I think. Maybe,
yeah. The scrum, I think that helps at the scrum. It didn't last week, but and the scrum wasn't great today. But I think that weighty back 5 can be an asset at scrum time, and the scrum needs to be fixed. They can't. like they can't
ignore
brush
this,
past
yeah.
the fact that the scrum was really under pressure. And a lot of people have sent messages or said to me, imagine if Ireland had a scrum, what they would have done today, because that was a real avenue for England to get into the game. There was a period kind of either side of half time where it was rock solid. That was the picture that Ireland needed to see, but too often they were struggling. I know Tyke Farrell was deeply unhappy with the referee and the way he was interpreting what Ellis Genge was trying to do, what we spoke about yesterday, trying to go around the outside, but Genge was the aggressor and he was showing the right picture to the referee, and the referee was buying what he was selling. And when the bench came on, they struggled. I haven't watched it closely enough to know whether it was O'Toole or Beelum, but it's an area of massive needs a lot of work for Ireland, albeit with Andrew Porter potentially to come back later in the tournament, and obviously younger players like Jack Boyle and Paddy McCarthy will come back in the long term, and they found out a lot about the guys that are next in line, so that's a benefit for Ireland. But the scrum has to be a big issue, and I do think they got blown away in contact at times when England started rumbling and rolling, and early on in particular. Now they scrambled brilliantly, but that first up collision, if England had been a bit more error free, if they'd been more accurate, they could have been in trouble. And if Ireland counterpunched really well, went 10-0 up, but if England had put their chance away in that first 10 minutes, we're looking at a very different game and a very different podcast. But they didn't. They survived those moments, and that's brilliant. But you got to still interrogate those moments and make sure that against, you would imagine that Wales and Scotland won't be able to do that to them in the next couple of weeks, but they're going to come across more powerful teams down the line, and that's stuff that they'll have to address. But they're doing it from a position of strength now rather than scrambling looking for answers. They're not playing whack-a-mole this week. They're just picking out little moments and going, right, we just need to tweak this, and we're going to be fine. Yeah,
and you mentioned Jack Conan there and a little bit earlier on in the chat. Like, losing him before the game was a massive blow. Yeah. And to be fair, I was feeling less optimistic when I saw the makeup of Ireland's bench. I was just really surprised that Cormac Izuchukwu and Edwin Adogbo weren't part of a 6-2 bench. But you'd have to say, tip your hat to Andy Farrell. He got it spot on. I mean, a lot of people, including myself, were wondering, Tommy O'Brien as the number 23, particularly when you had Cian Frawley there wearing number 22, who could cover across the back line. Now, obviously, he couldn't read the future in terms of one of his wingers getting injured, so it worked out very well. But even when Frawley came on, he would have been training a lot at 10 this week, and that was something that Doris was touching on last week. But he came on at outside centre, and I would say for all of Cian Frawley's versatility, I doubt he's ever played at 13. I certainly can't think of a game off the top of my head. He definitely hasn't played 13 for Ireland, but what an option to have to come off the bench. Now, he did go to fullback, didn't he? And they put Jamie Osborne into 13 when Osborne came back from the bin. But I thought Farrell, you mentioned Cian Prendergast, I thought Farrell got the bench spot on again, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Okay,
we're over half an hour. Let's get to England. I mean, thrashed by Scotland, thrashed by Ireland. Steve Borthwick looked absolutely haunted. I mean, the George Ford kicks and when the crowd were jeering him. Do you remember that? That just...
One of the English journalists asked me there at the end, because we reckon there was about 20,000 Irish fans here, which was amazing. But he was like, "Was that the Irish fans though?" I didn't think. I didn't think it was. I thought it was. It felt like more the English fans. It was. I thought it was distasteful, I have to admit, for a home crowd to be doing that.
Well, we talked a lot about what happened last week with the big cheer when Jack Crowley went on, and we've heard anecdotal evidence of people kind of jeering Sam Prendergast in the game, and it's kind of the same side of the coin, and it's to 100 capper. George Ford's done an awful lot in an England jersey. It was incredibly disrespectful to him, but I think there's a couple of cracks in the veneer of what Borthwick's... Sorry, there's a lot of cracks in the veneer of what Borthwick's rebuilt. The charity crashed last week, but it hasn't recovered. We came into... I think Borthwick has got this tournament completely wrong. I mean, he came into the thing, went to the launch and was telling people to book their flight, their Eurostar tickets to Paris, which is so unlike him. So unlike him. I know they'd won 11 in a row coming in, and the schedule looked good for them. Did Wales into Scotland, into Ireland, you could build, and he has there's good athletes in that team, there's good players in that team. He gave Pollock his first start today, and I don't think Pollock was the reason they lost the game, even though he didn't have a huge impact on the game. I think Maro Itoje's clearly struggling. He's been through an awful lot in the last month or two with the death of his mother. He went home. Sorry, he went back, not to home, but he went to Nigeria for the funeral. That travel, that must drain his energy level. So that's a factor. They have a number of lions like Ireland, and they're dealing with those consequences. But when they were coming through November and they had this POM squad that they were talking about, and they were putting their lines on the bench, and they looked like when they beat New Zealand, they were definitely the coming team. It was I'm not saying it was built on sand, but it was nowhere near as stable or as strong as it maybe looked. And part of that was that they didn't play South Africa. They played a waning New Zealand side, a struggling Australia side. All the games were here. At the same time, look, I tipped them to win heavily today. I thought there was more to them.
You weren't the only one.
Yeah, but I thought there was more to them. But a lot of those decisions that he's made, a lot of those players that he's backed, like what does he do with George Ford now? You know, like they're persisting with this defensive structure that puts their scrum half on the edge of the defence. Ireland had a field day with that. They went after both Van Borthwick and Mitchell in that area. Their aerial game is supposed to be an incredible strength. Well, it didn't work against Scotland, and it didn't work today. They got cleaned out in the air. And the thing about building your game on the air is that you're dealing with 50-50s. And I know they've done the numbers to show that if you get the crumbs, as they call them, you know, you're going to come out on the right side of it. But you're still leaving it too much to chance, whereas what Ireland was doing was far more accurate. You know, Ford missing the corners, drop passes, getting turned over.
The discipline was shocking. Did you say it was 12 penalties?
Yeah, Van Borthwick got done for lip as well. Like that's
shocking
stuff that you just don't expect, and that shows the pressure and the frustration that they were under. They came into this thinking they were going to a final in Paris on the final night. Well, I wouldn't back them necessarily against Italy in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
I thought there was a sense of panic as well within the England coaching box, because when Freddie Stewart went to the bin, he came back on for a minute and was then replaced. Yeah. I didn't really understand the logic in that, because surely when Freddie Stewart was in the bin, Borthwick and his assistant coaches would have discussed if they were thinking of bringing Marcus Smith on. And I did think Marcus Smith gave them a much better sort of attacking edge from fullback. But why bring Stewart back on for that minute? And it was almost... It's kind of demeaning towards him as well. If he was in the bin, you could have just kept him off rather than bringing him back on and then making him trudge off again. I thought it was a very puzzling change. I think Mauro Itoje got taken off last week early as well, didn't he? And I think for the reasons you outlined, like a really tough few weeks for him. But like, he is their talisman. It was his 100th cap as well. We should remember. Ireland completely spoiled that. I mean, the boots. Did you see the boots that he was that he was wearing? And I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of went around, you know, the Ireland dressing room as well, in terms of like trying to spoil that, because they would have known like he's such a talismanic figure for this English team, generational talent. But I think Ireland would have discussed, okay, we need to make this as sour as possible for him in this day. And it did. He come completely blown away.
But Twickenham is so imposing, and they built the whole build-up around the Itoje. They played Seven Nation Army, his song, as he came out onto the pitch. He obviously had his boots. There was real energy in the stadium before the game. I thought the presentation using the DJ that they had, I thought it was good, like in terms of the build-up and stuff. But it all... England, the atmosphere, it was all hollow. It was all what was it the South Africans called it in the World Cup? Plastic energy. There was nothing to back it up. There was no substance behind it, and they just didn't deliver. And they haven't. They talked big in the build up to this tournament, and they haven't delivered. They're 1 from 3, and they've got France in the last game. They could end up in the bottom half of the table again. And all that progress of last year, it's amazing what 1 game or 2 games can do. And they're right back where they started. Borthwick thought he was building something really special, and he was getting loads of credit for it. It's right back to kind of almost square one. And as I said, like that Italy game in 2 weeks' time, let's see how Italy go tomorrow. Italy had never beaten them, but that's in Rome. Italy were very good last week. They were very good against Scotland. They have, they'll match the English scrum, definitely. They've got Capuzzo back. Like England are suddenly in a place where they're a bit desperate going to Rome. It's just amazing what this tournament has done. I don't know what's happening in the Wales-Scotland game, but that's a lot tighter than people would have envisaged going into this weekend. What a Six Nations it's been. There's one class team. Ireland have shown it today that if they get things right, they can be in that company. I'm not sure if they're going to get back to France's level just yet, but things can change very quickly, and it makes fools of us all, except for Cian.
And I was just going to say, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of England going to Paris and potentially winning, because France usually have sort of one clanger in their locker. Like, I mean, they should be odds on now for the Grand Slam. Like you mentioned, they're a truly outstanding team, but we've known them to have brain farts in the past, and I just wouldn't rule it out. But in terms of kind of where England go from here, like Borthwick isn't going to go away from Borthwick ball. Like, that's a fact. But like when we were here at the captain's run yesterday, Lee Blackett, their attack coach, was here. Like, he's one of the sharpest attacking minds in the game. The job that he did with Bath in terms of, I know Johan van Graan is the head coach, but I think one of the best things that Van Graan did in terms of turning Bath into the force that they are was getting him in as attack coach. But like, there's no like we can't see his impact at all because they're playing this, and it had worked for them in their winning run. But it seems like such a waste from an English point of view to have this great attacking mind and not be playing.
I think we saw it when they were chasing the game. I thought when Smith was on and it broke up a bit. Some of their play in the second half was very good. Some of their tries were excellent. It just there was no like again they were you know, it's hard when you're chasing a game against a team like Ireland, but they were kind of panicking themselves. They were being beaten in moments. They were being beaten in kind of, you know, they were making mistakes where you know in areas where you just wouldn't expect a good team to make mistakes, and they were losing battles. And that's like, you know, you can play good stuff, but if you're losing the battle at the breakdown, if you're losing the air, it's not going to be enough for you.
News just in: Wales 23, Scotland 26.
A try in the last 5 minutes. Was it converted by Finn
Scotland,
Russell?
yeah, and with the 4 tries, so they get that bonus point as well. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's not a bad championship after all.
Absolutely, yeah. I look forward to seeing that. But that's I feel for Wales because it would have meant so much to them, and it would have been good for the tournament. But fair play to the Scots. They get their characters doubted over and over again. So if they came back from that, that's a good result for them.
So that is next up for Ireland. So down week next week, and then it's a Friday night kick-off at the Aviva.
Yeah, there'll be a novelty as well in terms of like Ireland having a Thursday in Paris. I think before we go, we should pay tribute, I think, to the Irish fans who were here. Like I said, I reckon it could have been like 20,000 people. When they went 22-0 up after half an hour in the fields of Athenroy, rang around Twickenham. Like I mentioned, like this has been such a graveyard for Irish teams over the years, and it felt surreal, to be honest. It felt like you were in Dublin when it was ringing around. There was chants of ole ole, and at the end the fields of Athenroy was like, it was amazing. And I think however many people were here, like this is a day that they will never forget, and that was something that Andy Farrell was really sort of keen to touch on in his press conference there. And it's so true. Like they speak about, you know, wanting to do the people proud, and it wasn't just the people in the stadium, it was people back home, and like it should be cherished for what it is, because there's been so many tough days here over the years, and it was a remarkable day. Yeah, like wins over Twickenham can't be taken. Wins over England at Twickenham can't be taken for granted ever. Like World Cup cycles, all that sort of stuff is important. Overall, winning championships. But I feel like there's a but coming, is there?
No. The tournament, and you know, sport is all about these days and these moments, and that's. You know, Sinead, you interviewed Shane Horgan about his try 20 years ago. We remember these days. Like, you know, Balakoon is going to be dining out in this. Stuart McCluskey, Gibson Park. These are the days that when they retire, they'll be remembered for. And that's the beauty of these fixtures, that because they're so familiar to us. But we know that when it goes wrong here, it goes very, very wrong. Yeah. But it's the best place to come and win.
Yeah, especially when you do, and like when they did the kind of whatever lap of honour at the end. And there was just that corner in the end, just down to our right, and they just it was something really special.
It was quite measured as well. Like they weren't tearing the arse out of it. I presume the families were kind of in that corner.
In that corner, I think they were.
And but they were fully deserving. Like how many Irish teams? I know they won the Grand Slam here in 2018, but how many Irish teams have been able to take a lap of honour in Twickenham at the end of an absolute
record win?
I think that's the 14th Irish win in Twickenham.
And a record
a couple of years ago I talked to everyone a player at least one player from every team who'd won here that was still alive, and like about their memories of winning here, and it has happened so infrequently. We've gotten more used to it over the last 10-15 years, but it still has to be cherished, and they deserve to enjoy it. And you're right, they didn't go over the top at all, but they have to enjoy it. And I think that is what's critical today for them, because they've had South Africa was hard, the 2 France defeats were hard, New Zealand was hard. They've had difficult days in green. It was about time they had a really good day to remind them of why they do this and what it feels like to be good again, what it feels like to play like Ireland again. And that's, if they can take that, bottle that, and bring that to the rest of the World Cup cycle and all that sort of stuff, this will be a day that we look back on as the day they turned the corner, much like 2021. And if that's the case, brilliant. And let's hope they back it up with 2 more wins.
And before we go, we should mention the Ireland under-20s.
Yes, incredible.
The legends.
And the legends, yeah. I believe the English legends were a bit shocked when loads of the recently retired Irish 7 lads rocked up to run rings around the older lads. But no, on its serious note, like the Ireland 20s winning in Bath, I think it was last night, and for the senior team to back that up today, there's been lots of talk about pathways and the lack of talent coming through. Well, that was an amazing win by the Ireland under-20s, and like I said, for another one here today, a really, really special weekend for Irish rugby.
I just think the support out there as well, just to go back, it felt like a throwback, but it felt like a welcome back. Ireland, wasn't it, as well? It was really something special, I have to say. Anything else before we go?
No, just well done, Cian. It's your day, really. It's all about Cian. But even more green.
Well, I had the Hive song in my head all day. Hate to say I told you so, but I did.
You haven't hated it at all.
Great stuff, Cian and Rory. Thanks a million for that. Well, as ever, this episode is sponsored by Energia. Plenty more reaction to this outstanding win coming up on the Indo Sport and Left Wing podcast next week. But that's it for now. Thanks for listening.